From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. Glad you are with us tonight. We are talking about something that's very important, and I hope that you will take advantage of this opportunity to call in, maybe share your situation. We're talking about mental health, and we're talking about ways to maintain our mental health during this time of year, and really by setting boundaries. And we have with us a licensed therapist, Ruth Martin. She's a licensed therapist, corporate speaker. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You also have a podcast. We can talk a little bit about that. But, all right, what do you think? I mean, there's so many things, and I encourage people to share their stories.
Yeah.
And first, let me just ask, what are your areas of expertise?
So in my private practice, I focus on chronic depression, eating disorders, maladaptive perfectionism. That usually gets people intrigued, and mainly over control. I have seen anxiety, OCD. That's what I do clinically. And then outside of my practice, I like to help companies and organizations really begin addressing their burnout and noticing how, like, the way that they're doing day-to-day life could be impacting, like, their longevity.
And what do you think right now are the things that are most impacting people's mental health? I guess the biggest threat to people's mental well-being. What are you seeing?
I mean, I think it's just sheer bandwidth. Like, we were not designed to take in this much feedback about ourselves and about each other every day. And then with that, like, speaking of boundaries, it's the idea that there's this perception of accessibility. So if we feel like we're always on, if we feel like there's always somebody that knows something about us or that we feel compelled to share with other people, that's just draining. But on the other side, loneliness is a huge problem too. It's like we're designed to be social. We're designed to be doing this, like, even if it is through Zoom or anything like that. But it's really hard to make friends, and it's really hard to sustain relationships.
Is it harder now to make friends? It feels like maybe it is, but I don't know if that's my problem.
No.
You know, is it harder to make friends now? I don't know.
If I had the recipe for adults making friends, I would be a millionaire, and I don't have it. So, but it's that idea of it is hard because there's only so much time in the day. We all have so much more on our plates now, and especially, like, we're still recovering from 2020, and so sometimes just being a human is exhausting. So when you think about what's the biggest threat to our mental health, just being a human alone is hard. It's hard.
Well, that's why I wanted to have you on. I mean, the past couple years have been tough, and so this is top of mind for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so what are you seeing, you know, in your office? What is it that's coming through your door?
I see a lot of people that, like, just the best word would be stuck, either because they've built something that they feel like they have to maintain. So somebody that has worked really hard and they keep going up and up and up, and they feel like they can't bend or else everything will fall apart. That, or, you know, moms, like, wanting the best for their kids, but, like, how do they even take care of themselves? I see a wide range of ages. You know, the younger generation, they have a lot more equipment and skills and language around their emotions, where I'm in my mid-30s, and I think I was the first generation to really get more of that language, like, in my later teens. But, you know, anybody, like, in their 40s and up, like, we're just trying to figure out how the heck we talk about these things. Like, what's going on in my mind? What's going on in my body? Like, what are these things? Because we used to be able to just put it aside and compartmentalize. But now that everything is accessible and everything sort of bleeds into each other, it's not so easy to do.
No, and not at all. And what you talk about, and I have lots of notes here, it's about setting boundaries.
Yes.
Right? I mean, you feel like when we're talking about our mental health and maintaining our mental health in this day and time, is setting boundaries a key part of it?
Absolutely.
And what do you mean by that? How do you define that?
So I define boundaries, there's 3 types of boundaries. There's preventative boundaries and then reactive boundaries. And then out of the preventative boundaries, there's preferences and then non-negotiables. So it's an idea of, imagine your being is like a house, and you have an electric fence, you have the Ring camera, you have the locks, you know, you have all the things to secure your energy. But if you never turn it on, nobody knows where to go. And so people will just hang out in your yard all day if they don't get buzzed by the fence. Or they will come in and, eat your food if they don't know that that's yours. And it's like a guidebook. So it's like that idea of like, in this relationship, we're gonna have guidelines for each other so that you can have like mutual respect.
And how hard is it to set those boundaries? It must be hard if people aren't setting them, right? I mean, and so people get trampled all over, and that leads to these problems.
I mean, I used to be awful at setting boundaries. I'm a recovering people pleaser, and it is a thing. Like, people pleasing so hard because people like admire that. Like, you're always so helpful. You're always there for me. Like, you never say no, and it's great for maintaining relationships one way, but also on the other side, resentment can build if it's not reciprocated. And so boundaries are extremely difficult to set, and they're also difficult to maintain, especially if it's like a response and somebody's doing something you don't like and you have to set that boundary. It feels awful. It's like, if you come in my yard one more time, I'm gonna ask you to leave. And then when it's somebody you love and they did something that crossed your line, you have to follow through for them to understand your need for respect.
And what did you say? So you're a recovering people pleaser. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So what does that mean? Now you're not a people pleaser?
I'm still I'm a work in progress.
Yeah.
But I am setting more boundaries. I'm becoming more cognizant of what I can actually do in a day, instead of like overriding and continuously, focusing on other people. Like, if they're happy, then I'm happy. And I'm not turning inward and like overly selfish. I'm just making sure that I have the energy to maintain these relationships or these expectations that others have of me.
Are there a lot of people? How common is people pleaser?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, because I might be right there with you. I'm not sure, but how common is that, or is that somewhat unique? And what goes into making someone that?
So, like, within my therapy, a therapy I do is called radically open DBT, and that's just like a big fancy word for saying that I deal with over control. So there's a big spectrum. There's those that are more under controlled, like impulsive. If you can't tell by now, I talk with my hands, so I'm actually very under controlled. And then on the other side, you have over control, what's more internal. It's hard to read, even if it does look like the people are like, I'm fine. Like, when like inside, they're just like planning their revenge on you. Like, that's what that is. And even within that, you have like overly agreeable and overly disagreeable. And this idea of being overly agreeable is a response to feeling in threat. So, you have flee. So at first, if you can't run, right, you try to run, and if you can't, then you fight. But then there's also the fawn response. So, like, if you were in my yard and I asked you to get out, at first I just like tried to avoid the problem, by just ignoring you. That didn't work. So I go outside and I try to like push you out, and you're not going anywhere. Then I may turn on, especially Southerners, turn on the sweetness, like, bless your heart, maybe I'll get you a pie. And then I'll send you on your way. It's that idea of, there's nothing wrong with all of this. It's when it's overused. So like, when you are a people pleaser, there's nothing wrong with being a giving human being. But if you're not intentional with it, it can be overdone.
And you write about, so you have this podcast, you have a website and all that. And so you write about your past.
I do.
And it's very interesting. I think we would benefit from hearing a little bit about it. Kind of what brought you into all this, and walk us through that. Then we'll start taking some calls. Edward, others, hold on the line here, but walk us through a little bit about where you've been.
So now that I've done my own reflecting on burnout, turns out I've been burned out since like age 8 when I quit gymnastics. Wow. I was a competitive gymnast, and I just quit one day, and I left a note like, I quit. We have it still framed. Like, that was the day I quit. And looking back, it's because I was burned out. I had been debating every practice I went to. Should I keep going? I love doing this, but I feel miserable. That was burnout. But since I was good at it, and since I was so talented, I should be grateful for that talent. But I was depressed, And so then that continued. I cheered. I was most involved in high school, believe it or not, and I did TV production.
Oh, wow, well, that's good.
But I was like a little jack of all trades, and where, again, that's great. Like I went to a great school, I had scholarship offers, there's all these payoffs to it, but I was stressed to the max, and I was wondering why. And it's because there was no room in my day for like genuine rest. I only knew how to rest when I was on the other side of the adrenaline, just like crashing. And the pandemic only exacerbated that, and something had to give. And in the process of me reflecting on the things that I was doing to perpetuate the burnout, the people pleasing, the constant yeses, the fear of, if I don't do this, then what will happen? I was like, I can't be alone in this. You know, I think a lot of us were already feeling burned out, and then the pandemic just threw gas on the fire. And now it's really cool to be, I would say I'm still in burnout recovery. I think I always will be, because I tend to overcommit sometimes. But it's really nice to be in a balanced place. And it's that idea of, we can't have it all on other standards, but we can have it all if we get really real and honest about our expectations and standards.
Before we go to break, and then we're going to take some calls.
Yeah.
You said, okay, so as a teen, you were super involved.
Yes.
And I see that with lots of teens today.
Yes.
You know, it's like, we've got to go from this practice to this practice, and I feel like when I played, and maybe I just wasn't as good, we would have one practice a week. Now it's like, every day you're practicing.
Yes.
And that's good, because it keeps kids active and it keeps them out of trouble. But I also do wonder, when do they have time to wind down? What do you think about the amount of scheduling that we see for teenagers specifically?
I think we want to give teenagers as much opportunity as possible. I understand the intent. Like, the best of intentions, but I do agree that our teens are overscheduled, and everything is for the college application. And it's that idea of like, you need all of this to look good. But what if you found what you loved and you were able to devote time to it and actually rest so that you could possibly do it better? It's like, you know, when you go to the buffet and you want everything, and really you deep down inside you just want lo mein, but you have to try everything else and then you feel sick. That's kind of like what we're dealing with. My kid's 4 and he's at a sport 3 days a week. He's 4.
Yeah.
Like, it's too much.
Yeah, we need to think about that. All right, we are going to take a break. We'll continue this discussion. I encourage people to call in. There is a number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Edward is on the line. Others, hold on. We'll take your calls. We'll be back right after this.